Hello, I'm Peter,
And I'm Harry.
and this is Man Up,
Man down.
the podcast where we talk about growing up in the 21st century as a young person
Our experiences with mental health.
and the things that we have to go through as young people in this modern day and age.
We'll be discussing several topics over the course of, we're going to
About 8 weeks.
about 8 weeks we're looking at. And the idea is that we draw our own conclusions, I guess, at the end of each topic that we discuss, kind of figure out for ourselves. We're learning, aren't we, whilst we're doing this
We're
at the
learning
same
about
time.
each other, and we're learning about. I think especially today, the day this is going out is International Men's Day. So I think it's a great time to be in touch with our emotions and vocalise what we're thinking, and just have a really open, candid conversation with each other.
We should explain briefly to our viewers the
How we know each other.
No, I was going to say about the name of the podcast, what it means.
Oh, name of the podcast. So the one that I came up with, and it's Man Up, Man Down. So man up, is a phrase that a lot of men get told a lot or get expected to do. We all get expected to man up and bottle up our emotions, and then man down is just kind of the opposite of that. We all have as men bouts of feeling down and feeling upset.
Yep.
So it's kind of the opposite of man up, man down, and the truth of it, I think.
What we try to, I guess, hide because of this societal view
Yeah.
that we've got to maintain masculinity and all this kind of things, this kind of stigmatization, if you like.
And we will talk. We will talk about female experiences as well. But
Oh,
obviously
absolutely,
it's
but
not
yeah.
something that we have experience with in that same way. We're not women growing up in the 21st century, so they have their own their own experiences and their own things going on. But we may from time to time have female guests on. So if we do, we'll
Absolutely.
We'll open
Yeah, one thing that's really important, Peter. One thing we wanted to establish very early on is that although, yes, the podcast is called Man Up, Man Down, we're still, it's not primarily going to be about men, and that I know that is the name of the podcast, but we still recognise absolutely. I mean, with all the topics that we're discussing, many of them very sensitive topics, and we'll be talking about our personal experiences and the experiences of those around us. So that will 100%. This will include women as well.
And we'll have female guests on. It's just a general way of rounding up what the podcast is about. So should we start before we get into today's topic, which is going to be grief? For again International Men's Day and our first topic. Should we start by just saying how we know each other, because that would be a great thing for listeners to know.
I think that's a good introduction.
So should I explain it, or do you want to? Should I say a bit? So we obviously went to the same high school, didn't we? And we didn't. That's the first time we met each other. I think we were in a drama club together in year 7. I think that's the first time we met each other.
My first recollection was French class.
But
that was quite later on, wasn't it?
That was a lot later on, I think. But I remember going to a drama club with you in year 7, and you hung out with a lot with a guy called Daniel, who was a lot taller than you.
Yes,
and it was like a strange double act. I thought you always went everywhere together with each other. It was such a weird thing. And then I don't think we were in any classes together in year 7. And year 8 we started to be in English together and a few other things. And then year 9, 10, 11, and we got to a point towards the end of high school where we got on so well that we used to really disrupt maths lessons and French lessons a little bit. Not so much that it was a nuisance or to anybody else, really.
Double trouble, weren't we?
But I remember we got told to move away from each other in maths once, and then we still, because we were talking, and then
we just wouldn't shut up.
And then we were still talking when we moved across the room. So we obviously got on very well, and then we kind of lost contact for a few years. And I felt, actually looking back during that time, I thought I don't think Harry actually ever liked me. I think I was a bit annoying to him. But we reconnected, I think about 2019, and we've been to pub quizzes since, and we've done short films together and since, and we've done a lot of stuff together since.
I think almost
Camping.
We've done so much together now, and I feel like our relationship kind of built more so after high school. Would you say?
I would say so.
During the time of college.
I would say so, and I think you, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, you went through quite a difficult mental health.
We'll definitely we'll highlight this on the next episode. Yeah, we'll talk about that.
You went through quite a difficult mental health thing in about 2019, and I think during that time, again, not that there's any positives necessarily to going through mental health issues, but I think you became a lot more open, and we have quite open, candid conversations with each other at late night at a bus stop. We'll just be nattering on for 2 hours. And being very open with each other, and I don't think a lot of men are.
Well, that's a big thing. Is it does feel, in today's day and age, it does feel uncommon that two lads would be so open to each other about because I think that highlights there's a lot of trust that we have for each other. That kind of emphasises a lot about our relationship. Is that
you're probably the person that I'm most open with, actually.
I'd say so. Yeah. I think I'd say that for yourself as well.
Yeah.
I think.
But I do agree. I completely agree. I think it's really important and interesting to talk about our experiences growing up, and I think it can be quite difficult growing up in the 21st century. I was saying to my dad the other day that okay, there's a lot of things that we've improved on since the 60s and 70s that he had to deal with, but
It's technology, really, isn't
yeah,
it?
vice
Everything.
versa. There's a lot of things that he didn't have to deal with that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
Things are a lot more expensive nowadays. Cost of living crisis and social media and mental health obviously is a lot more well known about, but a lot of people struggle with it. And I think it's just a great platform and a great place to be open and candid about it.
Well, yeah, I completely agree. I think, in a sense, that there's almost, because we have so much now, it's kind of just, in essence, it's more to worry about.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
True,
it's more to
true. How you look, how you feel, so much going on. So without further ado, I think we should start today's podcast, the first one, about grief. And today is International Men's Day, so if any men are struggling out there, make sure
You can always get in contact with us as well. We should suggest.
Try and have we're not experts, but we try and have honest conversations with each other, and we don't know everything, and we just try and be honest and open with each other. So if you are struggling, try and speak to those around you if you can. And there's charities out there. Mind is a great one that we're doing a walk for next week and raising money for. So make sure you try and get some help if you need it.
And certainly our
it's not weakness. It's not weakness. We all need help from time to time.
Well, one thing, like you say, I mean, more so perhaps in the podcast to follow, but we will certainly be talking about this stigma surrounding men and opening up about their mental well-being and this, that, the other. But without
further ado, I think we should go on to today's topic, which is grief. And we've got a nice... we're doing this in a car at the moment, actually. We should say that a bit of our USP is that we're in a car while we're recording. So if it sounds terrible, that's why. But we're in a car. And we've just parked up, and we're actually outside our old school. And I can see a beautiful... it has just shifted a little bit across, but there's a beautiful cloud where the sun's trying to get through. And I think it's really apposite for our topic today, which is grief, because it's like, the ones we love are watching down on us. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the topic. So what was your first experience of grief? What do you say? Because I think grief is one of those things that, I think most people probably go through it, and as a small child, you have a family pet that dies, you have a dog or a cat or whatever it may be, or perhaps someone in the family that's very old, grandma, granddad. So what was it with you?
Well, for me, I never grew up with a pet. So my first experience was, of course, with a human, and it was my teacher,
Miss Cam.
Miss Cam.
Miss Cam, yeah.
God rest her soul. Yeah, it was very sudden to me because, I mean, the year group, we all knew that she was ill and that she needed time away.
She was our head of year, wasn't she, at the time?
Yeah. But I don't think back then, because I was quite young, I didn't perhaps understand the complexity of her issue. I understood that it was something lung related, so I always knew that it was something where it was going to require a lot of medical attention. However, when I've come to terms with it being like a hole in the lung, that's where I started to think, this is a lot more serious.
Yeah.
And yeah, I received news a bit later than the rest of the year, actually, because I think it was on the school trip you were on.
Was it? I don't remember. I remember being told in assembly, I think, and it was strange because we had this. I think we had an assembly that basically said that she'd passed away or that she died, and it was strange for me anyway because she was someone that I think I only had about 3 or 4 conversations with, so I didn't really know, and then also having to accept that she had passed away when I had no experience of anybody passing away.
Yeah. It
was a very strange thing for me to experience because it was like I felt like I had to be sad, but I also wasn't aware of how you meant to react in those situations and how you meant to deal with it. I mean, because for me, I probably would say Miss Cam was the first person that I knew that passed away because I was quite lucky in that I never had a grandparent that died when I was a young child, and we had a few pet fishes when I was like 12, 13, but they I guess all died. I don't remember them dying. I remember burying them in the garden. I don't remember them dying. And a few actors that I liked as a kid. Elizabeth Sladen died when I was 11, but nobody around me died, so I guess I was quite shrouded. I guess, like you said with you, quite shrouded from how to deal with it and how to understand grief, I guess.
I think your first experience of death is always going to be the most prevalent in your mind. For me, when she died, I mean, it hurt me a lot because I had a good relationship with Miss Cam. She helped me a lot during the early stages of high school, because I did struggle with anxiety and just trying to fit in, I guess, and stuff like that. And she did kind of look to really boost my confidence. And I know that she was, of course, she was in fear, but she never let any of the students know that. She always maintained this positive outlook and everything.
Yeah, it was always. I mean, I always remember her turning up to school trips. I can't remember where they went. It might have been Blackpool and Pleasure Beach or something. And she turned up with a full, I don't know what you would call it, but breathing apparatus.
Yes, I remember.
She always turned up, and she was always a trooper with it all. So I do remember that.
She was always smiling. I remember, she taught PE. She loved physical activity. She loved.
That was kind of the saddest thing about it, though, in a way, wasn't it? Was that she was always so active, and then to have that such a big
taken
blow
away. Yeah, it was almost like it was taken away. I mean, I remember she'd brought her son into school several times. I always remember his name, Jack. Lovely young lad.
I remember him, yeah.
And I think, to my understanding now, it was her pregnancy that aggravated the condition.
Yeah, possibly,
in a lung,
yeah.
Because obviously you menstruate a lot, you lose a lot of blood and stuff like that, and obviously that in relation to a hole in the lung, it's not you're using more oxygen anyway.
Yeah.
It's just tragic. I think she was I want to say 35 or 36 when she died.
Yeah, I was gonna say 33ish, 34. Yeah.
So
like
very very young, and something I always remember that sticks out to me actually, and it's quite personal and honestly, I'm not too sure if, out of respect for her, whether it's something worth sharing. But I almost feel like I've got to say now. I remember seeing her burst out in tears and run down the corridor. I always remember that, and I've always kept that close to my chest because that for me was that was my first experience where I thought, yeah, that was the first time I understood how serious it was. And I think after that was shortly after that time, that was when she stopped coming into school, full stop. That was it.
Yeah, because I know that for a long while that she came in for a lot of stuff. She was in for a lot of school trips. She was in a lot to visit us. And she was always very positive, and it always seemed like she would, she wasn't going to die anytime soon. She seemed very positive about everything. And that was the impression that the other teachers gave. And then I remember literally, just coming in one day for an assembly and just being told that she died. And it was such a shock because we just didn't expect it, did we, I don't think? And it was difficult. But I suppose Miss Cam, although it was heartbreaking and it was someone that we had met and knew, wasn't someone that was that close to us. So what was your first proper experience of grief in terms of something that properly, really affected you? I'm not saying that the Miss Cam stuff didn't, but
of course.
One that affected you? Because for me it was my grandma. I lost my grandma just before, just after lockdown started. It wasn't COVID related. She was a very old lady, but. It really affected me, and it was strange because I think we take, especially grandparents, but I suppose everybody, we take people for granted and think they're going to be around forever, and it's just not the case, is it?
No, absolutely not. For me personally, it was my granddad. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and he just never let it get to him. I know that sounds so candid, but that's. Truth to be told, he really did.
Mm.
I think he always knew that it was going to be the cause of his death because he was an aging man and he was.
How old is he?
I believe he was 80 years old when he died.
Wow,
yeah, 80. So he was always in the hospital, always getting operations and treatment and everything. And
see, I was actually just about to ask you about that. So that was the thing that I found most difficult, was seeing someone that you love in hospital. I found that very difficult. And I didn't think I would, actually. I walked in and I thought, oh, you just see my grandma in hospital, it'll be fine. But as soon as I walked through that door, I just started crying. And I didn't expect to cry, and it was so weird because I was just like... Sometimes when you cry, you're kind of expecting to cry, aren't you? But with that, it was a sudden just like, wow, didn't expect it. And it's seeing someone you love in an unfamiliar situation, I think, that is difficult.
It is. I mean, it's one of those where, you know... To my recollection, as best I remember it, I was always maintaining strength for my granddad whilst I was in his presence, at least. I didn't want to show fear, or I didn't want to show any anxiety for him or anything, so I'd always make jokes and that in the hospital. We'd play board games, we'd talk about football, talk about anything to to kind of make him feel at home still, because I think that's the worst thing when you're trapped in a hospital ward all day.
Yeah, it's same. Well, it's same with care homes. My grandma was in a care home for a bit, and I'm sure she was probably all right, but she kind of she got to an age in her life where she kind of just moaned a lot and about stuff, and she never quite seemed happy. And I think that's the case with a lot of care homes. And I'm not putting down the system, because I think it's a wonderful thing that we have in place in the UK. But I think it is obviously very underfunded, and I think a lot of the time, a lot of old people are bored. They find it difficult to be out of their usual surroundings, and it's difficult. Same with hospital, like you just said, it's difficult. And
I mean, one of the worst things for me in terms of grieving is recognizing and remembering certain things that they've said, things in relation to their acknowledgement that they're going to pass away, when they come to that conclusion. And I remember my granddad saying, it was something along the lines of, I know I'm going.
Yeah.
Or, he's basically saying, he knew he was going to die, and we all knew that as well. That's the thing is with my granddad's case, it wasn't sudden. We knew. The hardest
was
thing
he kind
was
of at peace with it though, or was he could you see he found it difficult? Because there must be. I imagine when you get to that age in life, or well, any age in life that you think you're going to die, there must be a bit of you that thinks, this is really terrifying. Whether you prepare for it or not.
I think although he was prepared, I think he was upset. He loved life. He worked until I think he worked from the. I think it was only when he was diagnosed. I think he was because it killed him, I think, within 12 months. So I think he was working as a truck driver until 78, 79, I think.
Wow.
Which is phenomenal. So he loved working, he loved life, he loved.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you say that it happens within 12 months though, that happened 12 months with your granddad, because it was kind of the same with my grandma. I mean, my grandma was, I guess, a lot older than your granddad. My grandma was 94.
Well, yeah.
But it's weird because, again, it's about taking. We said before about taking people for granted, and there was a bit of me that, if you told me at the start of that year that you won't have a grandma by the end of it, I would be like, of course I will. She's fine. But it can just within a month or two, you can really see someone deteriorate, and it's really upsetting to see it happen. One thing, I mean, the one nice thing that happened with me and my grandma, and I kind of a memory that I'll always treasure, and I think it's such a nice thing. It's the sort of thing that you'd write into a film. It's just a beautiful moment. Is that probably a year or two before my grandma died, she said to me. I was obviously showing her some college work I'd done, and I was doing a TV and film course at college, or a media course, and I was showing her some work that I'd done, and she was saying, "Oh, that's great, I hope I live to see your first proper credit, your first TV credit or whatever." And the week that my grandma died, there was a documentary that I'd worked on a Doctor Who DVD that came out, and it was literally within a week that it came out, and I had a screenshot of my name on the credits. And when she was in hospital last time I saw her, I think it was the last time I saw her, I showed it to her, and it was so weird, because it was like she lived to see me finally get a TV credit, and it was just, I don't know. It
seems like that's something that you're always able to reflect on in a positive way.
Yeah. That she was there for that, and it's strange because I think that's the thing when you lose somebody. It's not the actual act of someone passing away that's the saddest bit. It's thinking about things that they won't be there for, whether that's, I mean, I'm looking at, I've obviously still got both my parents, and so have you, but if one of our parents, God forbid ever passed away anytime soon, you'd start thinking about, they're not going to be there for my wedding, or they're not going to be there for, when I'm having kids, or whatever it may be. And it's the fact of they're going to miss out on all these opportunities. There's things that I'd love to tell my grandma about now. I've got my first car this week, and I'd love to tell her about that, or that I finished uni, or I made this film, or I made an award-winning film, and there's loads of stuff I'd love to tell her, but it's
that's the worst thing. I completely agree. I think with us being young, when we lose someone, it's one of those things. Like with my granddad, I mean, of course, I think the thing that hurts me is that I never really had anything at the time, nor now, positive to reflect on in relation to like my career and everything like that. I haven't even got my driving license yet, let alone a car. I'm still pretty clueless about what it is long term I want to do in relation to work.
But people, I mean, we'll talk about this on a later podcast, I'm sure, because this isn't so much about grief, but people do things at their own pace, develop at their own pace. So
well, the grieving for me though is I don't feel that I spent the time with both my grandparents actually, and like my nana, she's still alive. She only lives walking distance from my house, and that's my new house. My old house was even closer, and I think that's the worst thing for me is that when my granddad died, I thought
took him for granted in a way.
Not that I took him for granted necessarily, that I just didn't do enough. I didn't see them enough. I didn't, and I think I the only time I started seeing him a lot more was when he was diagnosed, because I felt this obligation, and that's the thing I regret the most. I think is that I feel like why is it when somebody falls ill, why is it then that something becomes such an issue that you feel that you've got to make time for them? Yeah. Make time.
Well, that was I suppose if we go on to obviously grief is a thing that there is more cons than there is pros. I mean, I'm not saying there's that many positives to losing someone, but there is a few, and one of the ones I would say is that when I lost my grandma, I almost became I think I became a lot more I appreciated my other grandparents a lot more. I think I made more time for them and thought, actually, this isn't going to last forever. So I made more time for them and went to visit them more and stuff. I think that's one positive to it, is that you realise how, not to get too deep about it, but you realise how fleeting life is and how much you should just enjoy the people that are around with you and how much you enjoy their company and stuff.
Grief for me enables you to reflect the most on time and how precious time is, and I think one of the pros for me has certainly been self-reflection. Recognizing your own value and the value of those around you, because like you say, we don't get this time back. It's so precious, and yes, of course, I've got still a lot of remorse for the fact that I don't think to this day I saw my granddad enough. He was like the first person family related that died, so it hurts, and I know, and I think one of the other things is knowing how much it hurts my dad. It was on my dad's side. It was hit with my dad's dad.
That was always, to be fair, that was always my biggest fear with losing my grandma. I thought that my dad would find it very difficult and would close off quite a lot. But actually, it was quite again, this is perhaps one of the positives, is that I think me and my dad have communicated a lot better since my grandma died, perhaps because we've had this open communication and conversation about we had a lot of conversations about grief, and we went on a few walks and talked about it. And I think that's what, again, another benefit is that I think you become more open and more willing to talk about it.
So the two, I was going to say the three examples of the people we've lost, be it so it was Miss Cam, your grandma, and my granddad.
Yeah, they've
all passed through. I guess with my granddad's case, it was no doubt old age related.
Same with my grandma.
He developed the cancer, and obviously with Miss Cam's it was the complete opposite. Really, it wasn't age related. It was well, who can say? That's not for me to suggest. I don't know medically. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they've all died as I guess a result of illness, sickness.
Yeah.
For me, I always think, in terms of grief, if you think of like many people's families' experiences worldwide of losing someone to something heinous, something evil, like a homicide, for example. I often think, how do those people cope day to day? If you've got a murdered son or a murdered daughter.
Well, I think I was actually having a conversation with our friend Charlie about this. I can't remember why I was talking about it, actually. I think I'd seen a TikTok about someone who went missing. But I think it's actually in some ways worse if your child was to go missing, because you have to grieve them even though they still could be out there. But obviously, like you say, if your son or daughter's murdered, it must be horrible. I don't know how you move on from that.
Well, one of the cons must be the anger that you feel. Trying to deal with that anger, and I know, most people go into some form of therapy. And they're always having to, so I know it's often advised to find meditation and try and find peace with yourself in that way, and breathing options and stuff like that. But no matter how much you do that, it can't take away what happened. It can't take back time. It can't.
You've lost that person that we've spoken. Like you said with our grandparents, we. Whilst we do obviously grieve them and it's very sad that we've lost them, they were old people, so you know that at some point they are gonna pass away. But with if you lose someone that's, I guess, younger than 70 or whatever, it must be incredibly difficult, I guess, to lose them, or someone unexpected that isn't ill.
I mean, for me, I look at it like losing someone to sickness or something like that it's kind of like a wound that you can patch but never heal. Yeah. Whereas I feel like losing someone to a homicide, to murder, for example, I think that's a wound that's, of course never going to patch, but for me it'd still be gaping. I don't know how.
No, it's difficult, isn't it? I can't even imagine it. I can imagine it, and it's it's like, it would be like a horror story, wouldn't it? It'd be terrible.
Well, I guess, of course, homicide, I'm talking, the extreme here, but it's an example of grief and how we think, like, day to day, of course, that is, you're always going to be thinking about that person. Surely I can't.
Yeah.
You've got to carry on though, haven't you? You've got to live your life. You can't let death dominate your life for the rest of your life, because
exactly, because then it's eating up you from inside, isn't it? It must be really difficult. So what are the ways that I guess a slightly cheerier conversation, if there is one when we're talking about grief, is what are the ways that you've dealt with grief? What did you find was a useful way to get over it? Because for me, I found walking was really good. I mean, obviously, when I lost my grandma, it was kind of the very early stages of the first lockdown. So there wasn't really much I could do. I couldn't meet up with friends. I couldn't, there was a lot of things that were kind of not able for me to do. Couldn't go to university or whatever. So I used to go on a lot of really, really long walks. I think my record was about 27 miles. I set off and just went for a walk, and I think it's such a good time to get your headspace sorted and get stuff. Think about that person and put music tracks on that they liked, or whatever it may be. And I'm sure it's the same now that I've got a car. I'm sure driving is a beautiful form of therapy in a way, because you're in your own zone for a bit, in your own thoughts. And I think even if you do end up listening to an audiobook or music or whatever, I think you still take in that time to really think about them, and it can be a beautiful moment. I think it's a really good way to get over it, actually, is walking. I mean, we've spoken before about how beneficial it is, exercise and walking
physical exercise,
for your mental health. Yeah. So I found walking was a great benefit. And then the other things I did as well is I put it into a script. Obviously I've done a film and TV degree, or TV and radio degree. So I found a few months after I lost my grandma, I wrote a short 3-minute film about dealing with grief, and it was actually a guy that was on a run, and he had his headphones in, and then he decided he wanted to phone his grandma, and then pulled his phone out, started ringing her, and realised that she was gone. And it was that moment of realising that you can't phone the people you love anymore because they're not with you, and stuff like that. I found writing it down and putting it into a script, and then going on walks and thinking about that person really benefited me. And I'm sure there was other things as well that helped, whether that be looking at old photos or I used to light a candle for her, and that might sound a bit silly, but I used to light a candle for her birthday and New Year's Eve, and I've not done it so much recently because I moved out to my flat and didn't have the candle for a while. But I've got a beautiful purple candle. So what about you? What do you use to get over it?
I think, because of course naturally you're going to overcompensate everything after you've lost someone, and you'll overthink everything to the max, and it can become so overwhelming, like you say, and affect your own mental health in a lot of ways. So for me personally, distraction is a key. Yeah. With most forms
keep yourself busy.
With most forms of anxiety, depression, whatever you're feeling, I think it's always good to have something to put your energy and your anger and all those negative emotions into, and turn it into a positive almost. So for me, like you say, I needed something feasible to direct that anger towards, and I knew it wasn't going to be any like combat sports or anything, because that's not really my thing. I didn't want to fight necessarily. For me, it was the gym that I found where I could put everything into lifting the weights and just feeling healthy again. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's been smooth sailing like that. Throughout grief, a lot of the times I've drank heavily.
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've never used drugs, but alcohol's a drug, I guess. That was my kind of coping mechanism to begin with. But as we all know, if you're experiencing depression, if you're taking a depressant drug, it's only going to emphasise those those feelings, those emotions, whatever you're thinking, if you're, under the influence of alcohol or drugs, you're gonna think more. You're gonna worry more. It just kind of
Yeah.
it just aggravates everything.
Enhances
anything that
your
you're feeling.
emotions.
It enhances
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I had to think at a point. I was like, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I? It's not making me feel any better. If anything, it's just making me miss my granddad more and worry more. So, I started to, I guess, focus myself more. But I think it's also really important when dealing with grief to recognise those around you as well. And that's a positive, I guess, again, is that it does allow you to, really focus those around you, your family and everyone.
Yeah, and think and think that they're not going to be around forever. There'll be a time when you have to grieve them, and I mean, if nature takes its course, unless you go before them. But you will have to grieve other people in life, and I think that's the best thing you can take away from losing someone is almost take it, as a life lesson and go, well, this is how I deal with it, and this is how I should deal with it.
Did you ever have any kind of religious output? That
was interesting. I know what you're going to say. It's interesting because I am a Christian and I have been christened then, and I went to church when I was a kid, but I wouldn't say I was someone that was overly religious. But when I lost my grandma, it was something that I guess I did think about a little bit more. Because I guess the thing with religion is, whether you are religious or not, having some form of belief is a great way to rationalise things. So instead of thinking, my grandma's completely gone, never going to see her again, she's been scrubbed from eternity and the universe, it's lovely to think, well, she's out there somewhere watching down on me, or I'll meet her when I go, or whatever. She's up there somewhere, and it's ways of rationalising, even if you don't 100% believe in that. And I think that's something that there's some people I know that kind of really shoot down religion really quickly, and whilst I understand our generation isn't as religious, I think it can be a great way to cope with things, even if you don't follow it word for word verbatim what the Bible says.
There's
messages in it, and
I mean, a lot of people day to day, not even just in terms of grief, but like losing somebody, for example, but they'll look to religion for a sense of comfort. With whatever they're going through, be it if they've lost a job or they're struggling financially or whatever it might be. Sometimes they'll pray and stuff like that, and I understand, from people, from an atheist point of view. Not myself, sorry. I consider myself a Christian too. I'm monotheistic, so I believe in one God, the Christian God. But I just feel like atheists will turn to religion with death because they want to believe in heaven. They want to believe in afterlife. They want to believe that that's where their loved one has gone.
I imagine that atheists must worry less in a way, because if you're not even worried about there being nothing after you die, what are they worried about? I guess I don't know. I know what you mean. I suppose the idea of believing in something stops you worrying, because you're like, well, this is just a natural part of life. I mean, I don't necessarily believe in an afterlife. I mean, we'll probably do maybe a podcast about.
But you want to. That's my point. I feel like when it comes to death, you want to believe that your grandma is still alive in another place.
Well, I was going to say that I don't necessarily believe in an afterlife, but I do believe that there is something when you die that we as humans can't comprehend. We can't understand it.
So you kind of answered my question there. It was about kind of reincarnation, that kind of
possibly
the principle of reincarnation.
Possibly something that we literally have no. If a God told us about it, we literally our human brains couldn't comprehend it, because it's just such a different. It'd be like describing 3D to a 2D drawing. A 2D drawing could not understand what 3D is.
Yeah, no,
it's a bit like that. It's a bit like that. Actually.
Good analogy, actually. Yeah.
I do think there is something, but what it is, I don't think will become clear until we're at that point.
Like asking like a blind person to see colour or something.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Not feasible. Yeah.
So I believe there is something, but I believe it's not something that we are aware of or understand until we die ourselves, until we reach that point of understanding.
We talk about our forms of self-reflection and distraction for how we would deal with grief, obviously for other circumstances, and that for people that are not even orthodox necessarily but religious, and they'll kind of and as well, like people I'm sure many atheists as well, like they'll keep the ashes, won't they, in like a jar, or they'll keep some some item of clothing that someone used to wear or something like that. Something to, I guess.
I had it was really interesting actually. So I had there's an episode of Doctor Who, and I'm sure I'll bring Doctor Who up on a few of these podcasts just because it's the way I rationalise everything in my brain. But there's an episode of Doctor Who where David Tennant has a little watch. He has a little fob watch, and when I was about 7, my grandma bought me like a plastic replica of this watch, and I don't know if she actually bought it, but I think she gave my parents the money to get so they could buy it me or whatever. But I always thought about my grandma whenever I saw it, and I kind of put it in a box in the attic somewhere. And when my grandma died, I actually dug it out and took it to the funeral and kept it in my pocket because it was, like you say, it's these little things that that you associate with that person. You know, there's a song, and I can't remember what off the top of my I think it's called "Wind Beneath My Wings." I think it's called, which is a song that I'm not sure if my grandma even liked, but I remember it playing once in an episode of Basil Brush, I think, and she said, "Oh, I quite like that song" or something. You know, it might have been sort of a fleeting comment, but I now associate that song with her because she seemed kind of a little bit positive about it. She probably, probably wasn't overly keen on it, but around me she was positive about it.
It's almost like everything becomes heightened in terms of your senses. I find once you've lost someone, you start to recognise that. Like I only learned during the final, I guess, 6 or 7 months of my granddad's life that he was a passionate singer. He loved to sing all his life, and he was a big Frank Sinatra fan, and he played, it's a beautiful song actually, it's called Summer Wind by Frank Sinatra, and they played it at his funeral. I should mention actually, that's something that I guess I'm never going to forget, is I was one of the 6 that carried the coffin.
Oh wow, okay.
So that there is like something that's of course going to be very prevalent in my mind.
Here's a question for you. Did you cry at the funeral, if I can ask that?
No, it's sorry, I mean it's not something bad to ask, I think, because it's a natural reaction, isn't it? I honestly didn't. That didn't mean that I didn't want to, because my dad and his brother, my uncle, they were in floods, and they had, of course, I felt terrible. They had the sunglasses on and everything, and they didn't want to show it, but you could tell it was occurring.
Well, what time was it summer, the funeral, was it?
I think it was around autumn time.
Autumn.
I think, yeah, okay. I was. They didn't want to bring my younger siblings back then, and my sister.
What year was this? How old are you, if I can ask that?
So I'm trying to think if it was. I think
you weren't in school, were you? It was after school.
I think I would have been 19. I think it was
19,
2019.
Yeah.
So
okay.
It's been 2 years, I think.
So just before, actually, just similar time to, because my grandma was 2020 March.
Yeah, so around similar time. Yeah, but I recall, of course, they didn't want to bring my siblings at the time because that would have been their first funeral, and it would have been just a bit too young, and my sister didn't necessarily even understand or come to terms. That's the thing as well, is when you're young, there's a difference in grieving, I think, because you don't understand. Yeah. Like, I don't want to say that, like, because you're juvenile, you're naive to it.
But that's why losing a pet, I guess, can be in a way such a great thing for a kid to go through.
Well, my sister, that was because we never had pets growing up. The first pet I say we had, it was my sister's. Really, it was her pet. It was a hamster. She loved it to death. Sorry, no pun intended. But no, she loved this hamster. It was called Amber, and that was her first experience of death. And of course, the hamster, I think their life expectancy is like 2 years max. I think it's very young, of course. But she didn't just keep this hamster in the cage going over the wheel all day. She'd take it out and everything, and she'd take it all around the house, in the garden,
try and
everything.
Sneak into school.
Yeah, pretty much everything she wanted to do. She'd treat it like you would domestically, like a dog or something like. Of course, cats I know are a lot more independent, aren't they? And they just want their own space, really. But no, she loved this animal, and like you say, I always remember how calm she was over the death. I thought she'd be crying her eyes out and everything, but it was like, she just seemed that. I found out, because I feel terrible. I didn't give this hamster any attention. So even though this hamster lived with us essentially, I didn't know for I think a few months after.
Really?
I just forgot, completely forgot.
I remember, well, it's kind of the same with my brother's fish, really. I mean, I didn't take much attention with my brother's fish. My brother's got birds at the moment, and actually, I don't pay much attention to them.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? It is interesting how, when it comes to like a an animal's life. If it's not something, I guess, like a dog, you'd always remember and stuff.
Yeah.
And I know people have told me countless times that when they've lost a dog, it feels like losing a family member.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning this, but we have a good friend called Jack who he lost his dog, didn't he?
I recall,
about
yeah.
a year and a half ago. And I actually named a character in one of my films after his dog because I needed a name for a character and thought, oh, that's a nice tribute. But I think he found that incredibly difficult, and I know his parents did as well, and they got a new dog soon after because having to deal with not having that dog around left a bit of a gap, and I think that's the same in a way. You know, when you can't replace a grandma or a granddad, can you really? But I think that's what he did with his dog. Do you find that you relate a lot better, or you understand a lot better with old people now? Because I think I get on a lot better with old people actually than younger people. I don't know if it's just my mindset or what, but I think that if I'm serving on a till in the shop that I work at, I think a lot of the time I have a lot more sympathy or understanding for older people than people my own age that come in, actually.
Well, certainly the respect I've got for my elders is astronomical, but I don't think that's just because
of the grief
of losing my granddad. Yeah, I think that it was my grandma a lot of the times when my mum was busy working when I was younger that would always take me to the park, and she's still alive and well, which I'm very fortunate about. She had trouble during COVID with her heart. I think she had something.
I remember because we were at comedy night and you had to rush off.
That's well remembered. That's an example. And I had to visit her in the hospital. So again, that's another time in my life where I've had to visit a family member in hospital.
It's not nice,
and it's not. But you've got to. I think that's the big thing is you've got to maintain strength all the way up until the point of death. Then it's like everything comes out.
Yeah, because if you're emotional, well, I use the word emotional, but I mean obviously it's good to be emotional. But if you're emotional around someone who's dying, I think it can make it more difficult for them. I think you've got to be as strong as you can, essentially. It can't be nice. I mean, I don't know how kind of I use the word lucid. I don't know how lucid my grandma was when she saw me crying in hospital. But if there was any part of her that was kind of consciously taking that in, then it must have been heartbreaking to see her grandson crying at a bedside. It must be difficult.
I mean, there's many children's hospitals, and that I know there's one in Manchester, isn't there? And of course there's.
I think I went there once actually. When I was
and there's kids in there with cancer and all sorts of horrific illnesses and that are terminal and that they understand. Well, their families understand. I don't think necessarily the children understand. But it's one of those things where I don't think it's horrific. And I've heard of people, celebrities and that visit these hospitals and that when they come out.
I saw a beautiful thing, just to kind of interject you there. I saw a beautiful thing the other day on TikTok, I think it was, or Twitter or something, where the guy that does the voice for Winnie the Pooh rings up children's hospitals and talks in his Winnie the Pooh voice to children.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and that's the thing is whenever you see celebrities. I saw one of Johnny Depp, or he was going as Jack Sparrow.
Yeah.
And the
kid, I think I saw that. Yeah.
It's a very viral clip on YouTube, video on YouTube, and there was, I think a lot of the times that's what people do is they fill these kids with humour and that, and try to bring the outside world to the hospital as best they can and give them, and they're not talking about hope, they're not giving prayer, they're not doing anything like that. They're just having fun and they're just making the child laugh, and it's heartbreaking to watch, but at the same time it enables you again. I talk about that self-reflection. It's like whenever I moan about this, that, the other, I've got food, I've got shelter, I've got family.
We've said that before, haven't we? We've said that, if ever we are feeling down about something, and obviously, you can, it's perfectly valid to feel down at times because we all have good days and bad days.
Oh, of course.
But if you are feeling bad about something, you have just got to or we've got to, in our situation anyway, and I'm sure most people listen to this, because if you listen to this, you've probably got a phone or whatever. Really think about your own situation and think about, how grateful you should be for a loving family, friends, shelter, food, drink. We've talked about it many times, but you come back.
Yeah, people get it just taken away from them, don't they? And this is the thing, as I always say,
lots of people don't have it in the first place.
Exactly.
Family
well, that's a really good point. A lot of people, especially young children and that are spending years, the best years of their childhood in hospital, they're never granted that opportunity. They might have been born with something that's medically wrong, and And it's like they would give their blood, their heart, their soul, everything just to be us, just to be in our position, just to be able to go out with friends or go to the park when we want to ride a bike or this, that, the other. Like,
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking, and it does. This is what I mean. Is it's a big thing that helps me personally, whatever. Because of course I do. You know, as most of us do at some point, go through bad anxiety and depression and fear over this, that, the other, or fear of the future and this, that, the other. You've got to remember the present. You've got to recognise what we've got right now. And
it's like, you know, it's everything. It's everything. If I was living in a flat for a few months, and I've had to go back home now just because I didn't find anywhere that was suitable for me to live after the flat, and also very expensive. So I'm back home at the moment, and it's just so nice, and you know, so grateful for it, to think that, you know, if I go home, I've got family that love and care for me, and food will be cooked ready for me, and you know, there'll be certain, you know, central heating and everything. We've got running taps, everything. You know, you've got to think how grateful you can be for all that.
yeah.
So just going back to the grief stuff. You know, at what point did you kind of say, right, I need to move on from this now? Was it a conscious moment, or did you just find yourself going, you know what, I haven't thought about my granddad for a few weeks now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you could ever truly move on necessarily. I think that, I mean, of course, as I mentioned before, you've got to live your life, and that I think the best outlook you can have after is to think, right, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do this, and think, well, I'm gonna experience this, or I'm gonna travel, or, you know, it makes you embrace life and people around you
or
more.
for you, I'm gonna get a job. No, joking.
Yeah, no, honestly, literally, that's what I mean, because, but it's a sense of like, you know, of course I've got to do that for myself primarily, because it's my life, but again, just to recognise, just to think that if, and I want to believe, of course, as a Christian, I want to believe, but if my granddad is with God now, and he's looking down, I want him to be proud. I don't want him to see someone slouching, or someone that, you know, seems that he's given up or something, especially at, you know, a young age like me, being a 22-year-old man. I should be filled with ambition and you know, creativity and this, that, the other. So
and doing stuff that you enjoy.
Doing stuff, spending, because that's what he would want the most, I think. If he was to speak to me now, he'd say, Harry, enjoy your youth, have fun, because you don't want to look back with any sense of regret, saying, oh, I wish I travelled to this country, or I wish I did this, that, the other. But the beautiful thing is that these things aren't a given. They're not going to just come to you. You have to search and work hard for them.
Yeah.
So
got to live your own life, haven't you? So one thing I guess that a lot of people associate with grief, and certainly I do, I guess, and people associate with death, is graveyards.
Yes.
And the reason why I bring this up, because we've spoken before about graveyards, and
you've been to many.
We've been to many. We've been on a day out.
Sound like not like we're excavating or anything like that. I mean,
no, but we've been to a few, not consciously. We've kind of ended up on
during our walks and stuff. We walk past. There's a lot of graveyards within the
And there's a big one near us called Agecroft in the Agecroft Cemetery.
That's where my granddad was buried.
Yeah. And I think we have very similar views on grief, actually, but I think we have perhaps different views about graveyards, because I find them, weirdly, quite relaxing places to be, quite solemn, peaceful places to be, which I think you get quite agitated being in them, and quite anxious. Would I be right in saying that?
That is very, very true. I recall we went to one late at night, because I think you wanted to find...
I think I had a great grandma, and I thought, well, if we're passing and we've got a bit of time to kill, I'll just see if we can find where she is.
No, it would have been beautiful if we would have, obviously. I mean, it was a huge graveyard, wasn't it? We were unsuccessful in that regard, but it was still... It was, for me, it was strange. I began to feel a sense of discomfort at a point where it did seem that you were quite natural, and you seemed quite calm and quite relaxed.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know why. I just find it somewhat... I mean, the one, Agecroft near us, I just think it's such a beautiful one, because it seems like people are actually, families and friends and whoever runs it, put real effort into maintaining it, because there's some that they just do not put the effort into upkeeping.
I think the discomfort I felt, just to kind of explain to the viewers and that what perhaps I was going through, was it was just, you know, it was the understanding that at a point in history there's been real people buried under here.
Yeah.
I don't know the circumstances, I don't know how they died, I don't know how they were feeling up until their death.
Yeah.
And of course I've never known these people. Most of them weren't even in my time or anything, so... You know, but I saw that there was dates there of, like, you know, young girls and young boys, and And
Well,
it's
that's always.
just-
I think that's always a heartbreaking thing when you see a gravestone for someone who died very young or perhaps died in stillbirth, and that is devastating. But I just find, I don't know, maybe it's a bit of morbid curiosity, but I just find it so. I hate to use the word relaxing because it's not relaxing, but yeah, I'm fascinated by graveyards, and I'm fascinated by you're walking past thinking all these people had lives with hopes and fears and disappointments and loves and all sorts going on, and what are they now? They're a name and a date on a stone, and it's quite sad, I suppose, when you put it like that. But I think it's also fascinating to think these are people, and these are whole lives,
they were
whole
real
lives
people, yeah.
with, as I say, their own hopes and aspires and dreams and everything.
But that's my point, I guess, is that, in terms of the circumstances, which of course I don't know, you don't know for those people who've lived their lives to the fullest. You'd assume that'd be with the people that have lived longer lives, but it's not necessarily always true. Do you know what I mean? Again, I think that's the main thing, is if something comes along that's that's terminal and you recognise as illness is going to take away your life, I can't imagine being in that hospital bed being told the news and having all your family have to reflect around that as well.
Yeah.
How do you come to terms with something like that? You've got 2 years left to live. You've got 6 months left to live.
Yeah.
We estimate, of course, usually they always say, I feel like a lot of the times these doctors, nurses and that they'll know the inevitability.
Well, here's a question then, just to I don't want to say make it more light-hearted because it's not a light-hearted thing, but let me ask you a question or a little game with you. So, would you, if it was possible to find out your date of death, would you want to know?
It's a really good question. I've heard it before. I don't think I would personally, because I think
You'd be leading up to it then, wouldn't you, I suppose?
yes, and I feel like you're already naturally, because our brains, as human beings, we're not wired to fathom the afterlife and everything like that. But the only thing we know is time, and that it doesn't last forever. So the idea that I could know the day or the cause of my death or this, that, the other, as an inevitability, for me, that would just, for a warrior especially, that would just fill me. That would make, you could argue that more so than ever then you'd feel that you'd want to make the most out of every single day. But that for me should be a given anyway. That's the beauty of, and that's the beauty. I use the word beauty actually. That's what I take out of death a lot. My most positive outlook is that I think you've got to use time as best you can, because you just never know.
Don't know how.
God forbid, but either one of us could become ill tomorrow, or we could get hit by a car in an incidental hit and run or something like.
It's the same with anything in life, isn't it? I've been trying to apply for jobs recently, and I've been talking to again our good friend Charlie, and said he said something to me. He said, "Well, you don't know what's going to happen. You could get an email tomorrow saying you're going to be Director General of the BBC, but you could also not have a job for 10 years."
Of course,
and it's difficult. It is difficult, but that's what makes life so exciting, I guess, and that's what makes life.
Is that it's not a given, yeah.
You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, and it could be good or it could be bad, and it's difficult. But
it's one of them where things aren't a given. We have to work for them, but we should be grateful that we're opportune to do so. Because there's many people out there, all around the world. You look at what's going on in a lot of these Middle Eastern countries.
Well, someone said to me at work the other day. Actually, I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues in work, and he was saying that isn't it incredible that in the whole history of mankind and the whole history of the universe, we've been born right here, right now. Because if we'd been born, 100 years ago, even in this country, we'd have been chimney sweeps or whatever.
Well, right now as we exist, we are in, if you think about it logically like this, we are in the furthest furthest, most advanced time in the history of the world. Humanity, I think, is something like between 250,000 years old. Earth, 7.6 billion years old.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think, and I think the worst thing is that, we think, I know, don't want to go off the topic of grief, but if you think about, how it's humanity that's considered to be the most dangerous
Yeah.
for the history of the planet,
For the planet. Yeah.
for the planet's survival.
But it's also, when you think about how fascinating it is and how I mean, again, we will go back to grief in a second, but how fascinating it is how far we've advanced in the last 100 years.
But I think it's going too far in terms of, I'm not going to go into it on this podcast, but in terms of like technology and everything.
We can do a separate one, I suppose,
Yeah,
can't we?
yeah,
But
yeah. I won't go any further. But the point I'm making is that, the one thing that will not stop is time. And, I can't emphasize it enough on the podcast is, if it helps our viewers in any sense, if they're dealing with any form of grief, I think that if you recognise the importance of your time and those around you, it's a great reflection to have when somebody's died. It really is, because otherwise, if you're just if your focus is just primarily on, overthinking the person that died and worrying and thinking and going through all this remorse.
But that's the thing. I don't know who it was, but again, I saw a TikTok the other day that was a guy interviewing another guy about life, and he said that is the beauty of life. If we lived forever and we were immortal, why would you get out of bed tomorrow morning? Why would you?
Exactly.
It gives us something to get out of bed for and go, right, I've only got limited time to do this, or I've only got, not to panic you, not be like, oh, you're going to be dead tomorrow, because you're not. Well, hopefully not. But it gives you a bit of an urge to go, right, this is a finite amount of time that I've got on this planet. Let's make the most of it. Let's enjoy the time we have here. And let's really take it in.
I mean, we all want comfort, don't we? We all want to live in peace, I guess. Mm. But the essence of being human is dealing with fear. If you go back to our ancestors and everything, and our earliest ancestors and that, the fight or flight and that, it's a part of being human is that we're gonna fear, and a big thing is fear of the unknown. And a lot of people, the reason that they choose, I believe, or well, not necessarily. I say choose, I don't know, but the reason that they're so skeptical about God and afterlife and things like that is because I think of fear of the unknown. You've probably at a point, haven't you, Peter? You've probably pondered the idea that you could become ill. At a point.
I suppose so. Yeah,
I know I have. I worry because I don't necessarily understand such conditions as I know cancer's a huge one, and it's gotta be careful because I know it's a very sensitive topic. But when my granddad was diagnosed and that, especially with prostate cancer, because that's something that's oftentimes hereditary, or there's a genetic aspect to it. So I worry about my dad then getting prostate cancer in the future. I worry about potentially myself or my brothers, because that cancer in particular is a lot more, I guess, genetic in its. So
in the way it's passed through, yeah.
But like I say, you talked before. You gave that example about, would you choose to know how you die? It's like no. It's like I don't want to worry about that in the future, about getting that cancer or anything. I want to worry about, getting the best out of my future and building relationships with people, friends, colleagues, all
and
this.
Spending time with people that you like and that appreciate you, and I agree with that. So what's if we can just sum up, what's one thing about grief that. What's one thing that one thing else before we conclude? Actually, one thing I will say is that, which I wanted to touch on before, but I forgot, was I think when I lost someone, when I lost my grandma, and again I had lost a few people before, Miss Cam for example, or whoever it may be, but when I lost my grandma, I think I became a lot more empathetic. Yeah. Because I think when you lose someone, you can sympathise with other people a lot better. I think there was a point actually, and I'm not proud of it, but I think there was a point I went through in my own life where perhaps I was a little bit callous towards people. Not in terms of maybe people, relatives dying, but other stuff. If someone, if something bad happened, someone lost 50 quid or whatever, I wouldn't sympathise with that person. I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'd just be like, I might have said that, but I wouldn't have meant it. Whereas now, I see other people's point of views a lot more, and I understand. I think there was a time when I was probably quite a cynical person in a lot of ways.
Well, you know what the thing is, you got to remember it is, and it's great that you've spoke about this and been so open about it. Is I think that it's only natural. A lot of people go through it. One of my heroes, like Ricky Gervais. You've seen Afterlife, haven't you?
Yeah.
Huge show on Netflix and that, and how he treats other people around him when he's lost his wife.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about anyone. He doesn't care about how he hurts people.
But that was almost me before I lost my grandma, I think. I mean, I obviously cared about people and I cared about people around me, but I think there was part of me that I think I maybe was quite selfish in certain respects. You know, I'm a big fan of Doctor Who, and I want all my Doctor Who things to be in pristine condition. But if somebody else's book, if I spilt a glass of water on somebody else's book, I'd be like, oh, sorry, but I wouldn't actually take in that I'd done it. You know, it was kind of like, I don't know. I think I just became overall on the whole spectrum a lot more empathetic. But I think the other thing to realize when we have these conversations is that we are 22 years old. We are learning, we are growing, and not everything is going to come clear. You know, this is the whole reason we live, to learn and develop as people, and we're not going to be perfect from day one.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've acknowledged that I think I was a little bit callous at times, but losing my grandma made me think, actually, you know, people, you know, do get upset, and people need a little bit of extra help. And
well, one thing we should acknowledge, because you know, I don't want to like suggest that we're saying that we deal with grief easily. We don't. Like, this is the thing: is it's not easy. It's not easy. Dealing with grief is not easy.
We're recording this 2-3 years on from when we've lost our loved
ones.
Exactly.
So if you think about people that are experiencing grief in the present, if you think that you've given the example about how you think it affected you and you became kind of, you know,
almost a better person in a weird way.
Long term, definitely.
Long term, yeah.
But what I'm saying is, when you were in that initial point of grieving, you described there that, you know, you'd lost a lot of sense of morality in that for others, and like I say, that's only natural. I'm never gonna.
Well, I meant before she died, though. I meant that.
Also in the lead up as well.
No,
okay,
I mean just in general in life.
Yeah.
I think I used to be quite a cynical person. I think losing her made me think, actually, you know, it's you have to sympathise with others. You have to understand what, you know. We're not, you know, we had a great book in school, and we're outside our school now, so that's why I'm probably thinking of it. But an Inspector Calls, right? And the message of that play is that we are all, you know, joined together. We're all one kind of mass of people. We're not individual people that live. You know, we're all connected. So we've all got to be there for each other and look out for each other. And I think that's the one thing that I started to realise more and more, is how much you have got to be there for people and empathise with people. And
well, that's what happened in the show is with Ricky Gervais's Afterlife.
Of course it is, yeah.
Is in the end, he thought, no, it's only hurting me more. It's only giving me more pain. Is, you know, treating people around.
Did you feel like with grief you had to at any point almost act sad? Did you think there was a bit of a responsibility that you had to show that you were sad, or do you think that was something that you were sad naturally?
It's a good question, that, and I think of course this could differ from person to person. For me personally, it felt quite natural. I didn't feel like I had to at the funeral. I didn't feel like I had to put a face on or anything like that.
I suppose the only reason I was asking was because, you know, I had never lost anybody really before my grandma, and I think when my grandma died, I think there was my only experiences of funerals, my only experiences of losing someone were through films and books and stuff. So I guess there's a bit of you that kind of acts in the way that you think you should behave. Obviously, I was very sad about it. Of course, I was, but I think there's probably a bit of me that was going, you know, should I be crying a lot? Should I be distancing myself from people? You know, different things that you think, should I do this? And I don't think that's the right thing to do at all. But I think there's a bit of me that was going, you know, how am I meant to act? I mean, in terms of my grandma, you know, it was the first funeral I ever went to, and it was strange because it was during COVID, so it wasn't a proper funeral. There was only about 8 of us there, and it was a very small ceremony. It was all outside, and the vicar or priest or whatever he is, he gave some hand sanitizer out at the end, and it was just the weirdest experience ever.
I guess the best way to ensure you don't feel as if you're having to act when it comes to, I guess, somebody else outside of your family or something, if you're attending like a friend of a friend's funeral or something like that, is if you think about your own experience with a family member, for example, and how you felt, then you're able to, I guess, better empathise and
definitely. Do you think that funerals are important in the grieving process? Because there was almost a point when, because my grandma died when COVID was a thing and lockdown was a thing, there was almost a bit of like, oh, will the funeral happen? Will it not happen? Or if it does go ahead, can we all go to it in person, or is it going to have really limited numbers? And I think if I hadn't gone to the funeral, it would have been a difficult thing for me to process, and I think it would have prolonged the grieving process. So I just wonder, you know, if you couldn't have gone to your funeral, your granddad's funeral, do you think that would have made it more difficult?
Yes, absolutely, and certainly for my dad.
Yeah,
I think a big thing that, you know,
it's closure, isn't it?
It's all about closure. Like, that's one of the biggest things when it comes to grievances. You know, you need that closure, and I think for my dad, certainly, I'm not going to say that it's not affected him for months, perhaps years after. I think it always will. It's always going to be a part, of course, internally. It's always there.
Yeah.
but I'm not thinking of my granddad every day. And the best way I can say this, I'm not thinking of him every day.
No,
now,
because
like
you
I
move
was,
on
'cause-
with your life, don't
Yeah.
you? I guess.
Yeah,
You move
well,
on.
you've got to still focus your own life and this, that, the other. But like you say, is if the main thing that we can take away from grieving and that is this self-reflection, as I keep emphasising, and just the acknowledgement that of time as well, like I keep saying, and that we're not here forever. Our time is precious.
It's limited, yeah, it's limited. One last topic. Just I wanted to bring it up before, but I forgot. When we were talking about our first experiences with grief and Miss Cam and stuff, was there any kind of celebrities that passed away that really affected you, either as a kid or even more recently? Because I think that's one way that we deal with grief is through seeing people we've loved on TV or with.
Well, I'm going to pass this question to yourself for a minute. Well, I think because I'm sure there will be, but I think for you perhaps was that there was somebody recently, wasn't there, Doctor Who related?
Oh, there was. So, Bernard Cribbins. He was someone that but the thing with Bernard Cribbins is because I think he was a great actor and he was a great a comedian and did all sorts of stuff. But the thing with him is it was very sad because I had actually met him. Only briefly, only for 5 minutes at a signing, but I had met him, so I felt like I'd been in contact with him as a person.
It's always different, isn't it, when you lose somebody, when you've actually
met them,
when they've been in your life, even for a brief moment, or
Yeah.
you met him at like a convention or something.
Yeah,
like.
you connect with it a bit better, I think, or you have more of a connection to it.
Yeah.
My first real celebrity loss, I guess, the one that affected me the most as a kid or a young person, was Elizabeth Sladen died, who played Sarah Jane. She used to do the Sarah Jane Adventures on CBBC, and she was in Doctor Who in the 70s. And more recently, and she died very young. She died of cancer. I think she was only in her early 60s, and it was just so strange because again, you're not expecting it. You have this kind of vision that fictional heroes will just live on forever and ever and ever, and the people that play them will live on forever. And being such a young age, it was so difficult to get over. But I didn't again know how to deal with it because I hadn't lost anybody at that stage, and I didn't really react to it. I didn't really get upset about it. I didn't really get sad. It was actually years later when I went back to it and they made a documentary about her death and stuff and her life that I took it in more and thought actually that was quite a sad thing to go through as a young child, was a hero that I had watched on TV passing away. And the saddest thing of it all actually was that she died the day before my birthday, my 11th birthday.
Yeah.
She died 19th of April. And the weird thing about that was my parents obviously found out in the evening of that day. It was on probably BBC News at 10 or whatever. But they didn't tell me. They didn't want to wake me up because they knew that it would upset me on my birthday. So they didn't tell me on my birthday either. Actually, I went onto the computer on my birthday morning and saw that she passed away. And it was heartbreaking to wake up on your birthday and find out that person's passed away. But yeah, that was my celebrity one.
I think for me, I mean, this is an example of a celebrity, not somebody that I idolise. It's not someone that, because I mean, I'm a football fan, of course. If it was somebody in relation to, say, football or something like that, it'd be very different. But I think it was the circumstances surrounding her death. It was suicide. It was Caroline Flack.
Yes, I do remember that. I was
that,
at work actually that day.
It affected me quite a lot because I thought she's young. She's done something. She remorsed in relation to her partner. I think she struck him or something in anger, and of course there was media out backlash and this, that, the other. And
I suppose we can have in the future a separate podcast about.
Oh no, we will certainly
the
with
media
mental health
and role models.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say about the importance of the media and role models and
social
stuff.
media and that, the influence that it can have on a person's life.
We can have a conversation about that, I suppose.
Well, yeah, that was something again because I think it's when a death is sudden,
unexpected.
It's the suddenness of a death that I think can really. It's like that shock value, isn't it? Like it's just it doesn't, and that's the thing with a lot of people that lose people, even people really close to them, and that. It's like it doesn't sink in for weeks, perhaps months.
Especially when it's somebody so young, and especially when it's suicide like Caroline Flack was, because we had. I'm not going to mention her name just because I don't think it's appropriate to mention it. If the family wouldn't want me to mention it, but we had a friend at school who I don't think you'd spoken to.
Yes,
I knew kind of very, very vaguely. I kind of knew her. And she took her own life. I think was it COVID time, just before COVID? I think.
Yes, it was. Of course, it was.
Just before, I think.
I'm not going to claim for a second that.
No, it must have been during COVID, I think.
No, it was.
Yeah.
I'm saying I'm not going to claim for a second that I have any understanding of what this person was going through. I know, of course, who you're referencing, but for me, it was just it was just so sad. Like, you know, I mean, well, of course, suicide and that, but it was just so sad.
Yeah.
And
because that potential of what their life could have been, dying age 19, 20, whatever they were.
death through suicide, I think, in particular, is just
It's horrific, isn't it?
it's horrific because you know that. I mean, we know, sorry, because you know we've had, you know, we'll talk about it, of course, on another podcast, but we understand that it's not the right option.
Yeah, we'll do a separate
necessarily.
one about
Yeah.
mental health, I guess. But yeah,
Yeah.
we know that it can be so damaging to the family. Not saying that, you know, when you're in that mindset, you know, you're not seeing that there's going to be a positive. But of course, life's always, there's always ups and downs in life, and there'll always be a better day. But I just thought that was so heartbreaking. I just thought it was so sad. Seeing it on, I think it was Berry Times or something, saying that she'd killed herself. So it was sad, especially because someone I didn't really know. And I've said this to you before actually, but she was somebody who was in the year below us at school, and she used to always go, "Yes, Peter," and kind of in a kind of jokey way. And I always thought she was taking the mick, but I think actually she was just being nice and was just saying hi to me and was just starting a conversation.
Well, I read up on, of course. I mean, there were floods on Instagram, weren't there? From her friends and that. I mean, she seemed like a really popular girl, and you know,
and a very positive girl actually when she was alive.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and
sometimes it's the ones that are more positive that are the ones that are struggling more.
100%. That's so true. And I recall, you know, reading about it and everything, and she just seemed so bubbly and fun, and it's just, that's the thing, is we don't know people's circumstances. We don't know what they're feeling internally and that. So
maybe we should again, without naming it, maybe we should dedicate this podcast day to her then, and her memory.
Absolutely,
nice
absolutely. Yeah, it'd be something that, again, it's not, and we're doing this like from the heart. We should emphasise that it's not, you know, it's not something.
No, I'm not saying it's. Yeah,
we're not feeling a sense of obligation because of the topic, just to dedicate this to this girl. But it's something where, you know, like
we went to put flowers down where she'd killed herself, didn't we, about a year ago?
Yes, yeah, we did.
Over a year
and
ago.
there was many, weren't there?
There was still, even after probably a year after she died, there were still loads of flowers. So we went to put some flowers down, and I could see that you were genuinely really upset about it, even though you'd never met the girl. I didn't really know the girl.
But that was the problem. Is I wish
you wish that you'd.
I wish I would have. I wish I would have spoken
to
to her. I wish I would have, because I've you know, of course we'll go into this on another.
But I've
on
never.
another
Well, again, we will talk about this. But again, I've never seen you react like that before, because you suddenly, we were walking along, just having a conversation, and when you got into your mind that we were nearby to where she'd killed herself, your mind just...
I zoned out.
You zoned out. You were asking me loads of questions, like, what do you think? Do you think of this? And
it was like I guess that's how you could tell that I was really suffering at that point.
In your charity shop coat.
yeah, I remember. And
shop coat, yeah.
And I just kept seeking reassurance, didn't I?
Yeah,
almost,
but I think that's one thing, and again, we will talk about mental health, anxiety and stuff, but I think that's one thing that a lot of people do when they are anxious about something, is they will just seek reassurance.
And this girl, unfortunately for me, like, I wish she would have been, but she wasn't even in my life, so it just goes to show, you know.
Yeah.
I think it was just the age that she passed and the circumstances around it, and how, you know, I just knew she had so much life to give that it just, sad,
isn't it? Sad. When they feel that they've got no other options, but yeah. Anyway, should we conclude this podcast?
I think now's a good time.
Yeah, and say thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Our next episode will be about...
I can't recall.
You can't remember. It's going to be about mental health, and we're doing a walk from Mind, which is a great charity that does a lot of help for young people. And we're walking all the way from Prestwich to Preston.
Yes, now I remember.
So that's on, we believe, unless the date changes, because we are recording this in advance, but unless the date changes, it'll be 21st of November. So, yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed getting to know us and getting inside our minds a little bit about grief. I know it's not the cheeriest topic ever, but I think it's one that's very important to discuss. And I think, especially today, with it being International Men's Day, not at the time of recording, but the time this will go out, International Men's Day, I think it's very important to... you know, as men and women as well, but as men, you know, talk about our emotions and
it's everyone, isn't it? It's everyone. The main thing we're saying, it's everyone, but of course, everyone includes men. So
I think men struggle more with grief, and we'll talk about mental health and men, I'm sure, at a later date. But yeah, I think it's very important to talk about it. So thank you for joining me today, Harry, and it's been a pleasure talking to you about these deep things. So yeah, join us next week and we'll be talking about mental health and our experiences of mental health. So thanks
again for listening.
Bye.